Welcome back, Deep Divers. Today we're going to be looking at the Tkinter Message widget.
Okay.
You sent over some interesting code snippets for us and a great article from plus2net.com.
Yeah.
So let's dive in and see what we can learn about displaying text effectively in Tkinter applications.
Yeah. The message widget is one of those tools that might seem deceptively simple at first, but it offers a surprising amount of power and flexibility when it comes to presenting text within your GUI.
It's easy to just default to labels for everything.
Right.
But I'm sensing that there's a whole lot more to uncover here.
Absolutely. Think about the last time you tried to wrestle with multiline text in a regular label widget. All those manual new line characters. The message widget just throws that headache out the window with its automatic text wrapping, which is especially handy when dealing with dynamic content.
So no more fiddling with new lines, especially as the content changes. That's a win for efficiency right there.
Exactly. And it's not just about whether the text wraps, but how it wraps. The aspect attribute, for example, lets you fine-tune the width-to-height ratio, influencing how tightly or loosely the text flows within the widget.
Now that you mention aspect, the source material does mention that it plays a role in the calculation of text wrapping.
Okay.
Could you elaborate on that a bit? How exactly does that ratio impact what we see on the screen?
Sure. Imagine a message widget as a container with a set width.
Okay.
When you specify the aspect attribute, you're essentially defining the target ratio between the widget's width and its height. Teacher then uses this ratio to determine the optimal point at which to wrap the text to the next line.
Okay.
A higher aspect value results in a wider, shorter widget, potentially leading to more frequent line breaks. Conversely, a lower aspect value creates a taller, narrower widget, accommodating more text per line before wrapping occurs.
So it's all about finding that visual sweet spot, balancing the available space with readability. This reminds me of a project I was working on where I needed to display dynamic help messages based on user input. Could you see the message widget being useful in that kind of scenario?
Absolutely. In fact, the source code you provided actually demonstrates this very concept.
Okay.
It shows how to create a dynamic help message that updates based on user selections in radio buttons and an entry field. The message widget becomes like a built-in guide, responding to the user's actions and providing context-sensitive information.
That's a really elegant way to provide guidance without cluttering the interface. It's like having a conversation with the user, guiding them through the application.
Right.
But speaking of potential limitations, I'm curious, the article also mentions that message widgets don't inherently support scroll bars. Why is that?
You've hit on a common point of confusion.
Okay.
The lack of scroll bars might seem counterintuitive at first, but it goes back to the message widget's intended purpose.
Okay.
It's designed for relatively concise, self-contained blocks of text, helpful tips, status updates, or short instructions. It's not meant for displaying lengthy documents or scrollable content. That's where the text widget comes in. It's built specifically for handling larger volumes of text.
So it's about choosing the right tool for the job.
Exactly.
The message widget shines when you need to present information clearly and concisely, almost like a well-formatted note within your application.
Exactly.
Now, while the lack of scroll bars might seem like a limitation, the source material does raise some thought-provoking questions about other possibilities.
Right.
For example, can the Tkinter Message widget handle interactive events?
It can, yeah.
That opens up some really interesting design possibilities.
It does.
It would be amazing to have a message widget that could respond to things like clicks or mouse overs.
Yeah. Imagine being able to embed hyperlinks within a help message, allowing users to instantly access relevant documentation or tutorials. Or think about using interactive elements within a message widget to guide users through a step-by-step process.
It's like adding a whole new dimension of functionality to what might initially appear to be static text. The article also mentions the take focuses attribute. Could you explain how that ties into this concept of interactivity?
Absolutely. The take focuses attribute determines whether a message widget can receive keyboard focus. This means that even though it might not have traditional clickable elements, you could potentially navigate to it using the tab key and then trigger actions using the enter key or other keyboard shortcuts.
That could be incredibly useful for accessibility, ensuring that all users can interact with those elements regardless of their input method.
Precisely. It highlights the importance of thinking beyond the obvious when it comes to user interface design. Now, another intriguing question from the source material revolves around images. Is it possible to integrate images within a Tkinter Message widget?
That seems like it would be a fairly standard feature. Why is that even a question?
Yeah, it's one of those areas where Tkinter's flexibility can sometimes lead to interesting challenges.
Hmm.
The message widget, by design, is primarily text-focused. It's not as straightforward as using a label or canvas widget, which have built-in support for displaying images.
So how do developers typically work around this limitation? The article hinted at some creative solutions.
Well, one approach is to leverage the power of layout and spacing,
Okay.
strategically positioning a separate label widget containing the image very close to the message widget.
Okay.
This can create the visual illusion that the image is part of the text display.
It's like a bit of UI magic, carefully arranging elements to achieve the desired effect. Of course, that could get tricky with dynamic content.
You're absolutely right. Maintaining that visual harmony would require meticulous planning and potentially even dynamic adjustments to the layout as the content changes. It's a trade-off between visual appeal and complexity.
Speaking of trade-offs, I think it's worth revisiting the comparison between the message widget and the label widget. We touched upon this earlier, but I'd love to delve a bit deeper into their respective strengths and weaknesses. It's easy to reach for a label widget out of habit, but understanding when to leverage the unique strengths of the message widget can make a real difference in the clarity and elegance of your GUI.
Exactly. Think of the label widget as your go-to for simple, straightforward text displays titles, labels next to input fields, or concise instructions. It's lightweight, efficient, and gets the job done without any fuss. The message widget, on the other hand, is your secret weapon for those situations where you need that extra control over multi-line text and automatic text wrapping.
So for longer blocks of text, especially when you need to accommodate dynamic content or want to fine-tune the wrapping behavior using the aspect attribute, the message widget really shines.
Precisely. It all comes down to choosing the right tool for the job, and understanding the subtle nuances of each widget empowers you to make those decisions with confidence.
Speaking of nuances, one question that came up in the source material that I found interesting was about customizing the font and color of a message widget. Is there anything unique about that process compared to other Tkinter widgets?
That's a great question, and thankfully it's very straightforward. Just like with the label widget, you have full control over the font and color of your text within a message widget. You can customize those attributes directly when you create the widget or modify them later using the config method. Tkinter strives for consistency across its widgets, making it easier for developers to transfer their knowledge and skills seamlessly.
That consistency is definitely appreciated. It's always reassuring to know that the same principles apply regardless of the specific widget you're working with.
Absolutely. Tkinter's design philosophy emphasizes intuitive and predictable behavior, which is a real asset for both novice and experienced developers.
It sounds like we've covered a lot of ground today, from the basics of text wrapping and dynamic updates to exploring the intriguing possibilities of interactive events and image integration. We've really delved into the versatility of the Tkinter Message widget.
It's been a fascinating deep dive. I'd encourage everyone listening to experiment with these concepts in their own projects.
Hmm.
Don't be afraid to push the boundaries of what you think is possible with the message widget. You might be surprised at what you can achieve.
And there you have it, your crash course on mastering the art of text display with the Tkinter Message widget. We've gone from zero to informed, uncovering hidden depths and exploring creative possibilities along the way. Now it's your turn to put this knowledge into action. Until next time, happy coding.